Okay, this is episode 2 of OverSight, and already it's not just 2 boxes, there are 3 boxes, and in the box in the middle is me, Thorin. I mean, if you couldn't tell that by the fact that I'm talking and the words coming out of my mouth, then you probably don't even deserve to know that, so maybe I'm not. Maybe actually I have an editing system where I'm one of the other people, and then I just took them saying something similar and dubbed over it, so maybe I'm the guy in the right box, you don't know. So actually in the right box, if that's not me, is Monte Cristo, and you know who he is. He does OG and Apex casting, etc. OG did the Blizzard Overwatch Cup and all that jazz. And our guest, the first ever guest on OverSight, because I couldn't find anyone above gold, and all that stuff. No, it's obviously ZP, who famous for lots and lots of casts in Overwatch, particularly obviously did the Overwatch Open and numerous other events. So we did have the first huge scale event in Overwatch, but bizarrely it obviously was not real Overwatching as much as it wasn't actual teams who play, and it wasn't necessarily like some of the teams, I'm pretty sure, didn't have a lot of practice time, etc. What were your initial impressions of the Overwatch World Cup, ZP? Like going into it, what did you expect, and what was like the outcome? Like what did you think of the concept of having like just a nations tournament basically?
So there are a few stages to react to the announcement. Obviously, with everyone being in and around the top level teams for a long time, when it first came out, people were sort of anxious, going, "Okay, why are we doing this? You know, we want to see top level pro teams here." There was a lot of conflict in the community in the very beginning, where people are just sort of like, "Why are we doing this?" I think, though, as the event went on and teams got into it, it actually was a very positive event where we got to see some good games, even if every team wasn't at 100%. And definitely we got to see some good storylines. Obviously, we saw South Korea have a really crazy storyline. We saw Russia come through where people really weren't expecting. And I don't know, it's a case where I think even though people in the very beginning of the pro scene weren't super happy, it still turned out to be a pretty good event that created storylines of its own.
Okay, Monty, what were your general thoughts for the concept of the event?
I think what's really important to remember is that the esports scene of Overwatch is still very much in its infancy, and there aren't any. I mean, the only like major league that exists right now exists in Korea, and I mean we've had some big tournaments like Turner, hosting the Overwatch Open, and we're getting more and more. DreamHack's coming up, MLG Vegas, Gfinity hosting one as well. But I think it's really important to remember that for the casual Overwatch player, that the current teams don't actually mean that much, right? And so from, I think, Blizzard's perspective, they thought having a show match where they could involve more of the casual community by promoting it as sort of a first step into esports would be more accessible if they had, not that Blizzard has told me this is just my theory, would be more accessible if it was more based around countries or something that people could immediately identify with, rather than if they're not esports fans trying to understand what Envy and Cloud9 exactly mean and who these players are. So I think it gave them something to latch on to cheer for immediately. And I also think that for Blizzard's first event that they didn't want to have a big team competition because you can tell.
By the way, on the background of your mic, it sounds like there's like some crackling sometimes when you talk. Can you just check this not like a cable loose?
Okay. Let me try doing something else here. Hold on.
Well, Monty is fixing that just to sort of just to sort of add on there. I think more than anything else, it was a good showcase to people that weren't familiar to the game, as Monty is mentioning, sort of getting into it too. Don't forget that there was a lot of people to be impressed for coming in. Not only people coming in watching on, say, the BlizzCon stream, but there was a lot of important people there in terms of esports owners, all the rest. So packaging into sort of a country v country setup, where it's a little bit more laid back, but you can sort of get behind rooting interests. Definitely, you look at the overall scope of the event and those interests being represented, it definitely made sense to market the event in that way. And like I said, overall, I mean, the event itself at BlizzCon was amazing. The arena was really cool, and fans definitely got into it. So for an event that appealed to casual players and sort of showcased the game, it worked out really well and much better than early critics would have thought when based off the first announcement.
Because I mean, obviously, keep going.
It also had like the largest viewership to date, and certainly part of that was Blizzard itself pushing it for the first time. I mean, they've got a Twitter that's like 1.2 million for Play Overwatch right now, and certainly, that helps. And I think as they move forward, it will only help more. Hopefully, they'll start integrating more stuff into the client itself for esports. But I also think that because it was a Blizzard event, and because really I think what this was about was announcing the Overwatch League. Like, that was the big point. If you look at the decisions that Blizzard made, like before the finals between Russia and Korea, they rolled out the trophy. And Doe and I got specifically instructed to say, this has been a great show match, but this trophy, like, it's really like about the real competition that's happening next year. And that's Blizzard's emphasis. And I don't think Blizzard wants to feature the teams that exist right now, because as far as they're concerned, these teams don't exist really. I mean, they do sort of, but that's not who's going to exist necessarily next year once the Overwatch League starts. So I don't think Blizzard's actually going to host any events that feature these current teams until they get their franchise buy-ins. So I think there was like a lot of layers to this actually, and I think it was a very clever introduction by Blizzard to what their plans were.
That makes a lot of sense. And actually, to the point of not wanting to feature the teams here just yet, you think about what we've seen with team roster shakeups as of late and all the rest. It's probably safe to assume that you're going to be seeing a lot more of that in the lead up to whatever league might happen. So getting people interested to be like, here's Team Envious with this roster, where, by the way, now heading to league next year, almost everyone on the team has changed. That's entirely a possibility for some of these teams. So it probably makes sense not to go, here's our BlizzCon exhibition. By the way, everything you saw last year doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. I think Blizzard just has, I would say, loftier goals than what currently exists. And that makes sense. Again, it is so new, this whole scene.
Is loftier really the word? I mean, I don't know how lofty it is to just be like, I won't let you play as a team because I have decided I want something else to be representing my brand. You just mean larger scale?
Yes. Okay. If you don't want to use lofty, we could use larger scale, more infrastructure. Also, I think just giving the scene more time to settle down, figure out which players are going to be good and play together, have that synergy. There's just so much roster changing going on right now in Overwatch. It's just kind of ridiculous, actually, how many players are figuring out for the first time that they maybe not cut out for the constant travel of a pro gamer lifestyle, or they can't live with these teammates for more than 6 months. Typical pro gamer complaints that I think they should just get the fuck over. Or more legitimate ones like, we're losing and we need to make a change and this person's style doesn't fit our team. So I think that the scene itself and the players need to work out all their issues amongst each other, and that's sort of what we're going through right now.
And the thing about Overwatch, too, is that the teams have been known for having incredible volatility. I mean, realistically, you look at the sequence of events that are held back to back to back, that sort of artificially kept teams in the same roster for longer than you would have expected, because going before those events, really before Overwatch Open, when the qualifiers started for that, I think back in August, teams changed up rosters quite a bit. I mean, even teams that were on a ridiculous winning spree. You look back at the original IBD-QD team, which would later form the core of Envious. They were on a gigantic winning spree when suddenly TviQ and Mendo are no longer on the team and they rebuild. It's just like, but you guys weren't losing. And you've still, reshuffled your roster. It's just like...
To be fair, most scenes, when you say artificially kept together, most scenes, these chains of events are normal and they do keep teams together, right? Mm-hmm. So players learn how to deal with it instead of just falling apart for no good reason whatsoever.
I mean, that's literally the only thing that does keep people together if they don't want to already. Like, for example, in CSGO at the moment, one of the reasons we've had a little bit more stability is because they increased the major cycle from being just the major itself. So anyone who had to qualify has to keep roughly a similar lineup. And then you've also got the factor that E-League meant you could only make 2 roster moves. So if these kind of things weren't in place, I'm certain teams would have made more changes in CSGO. So that probably is required anyway going forwards.
It's been a tough sell for the Overwatch players and dealing with that. Because without going too much into politics, there's so many teams here, even teams that on the face value are well functioning. You get into the internals, just like, oh my god, these guys are playing with each other, and it'll be interesting.
To be fair, that's part of it too. Is that a lot of the arguments that I hear about the players are just so absurd, and also the other fact is that Overwatch is so new that there aren't really coaches or managers yet. Yes. We're starting to see a couple coaches come into the scene now. But there's nobody really to do conflict resolution between the players. And as everybody who's been involved in esports knows, you absolutely must have that. Otherwise, the pro players are going to do completely dumb shit.
Okay, so one of the reasons why I wanted to set up the expectations for the Overwatch World Cup is the name itself is obviously going to be misleading to some people who don't follow the scene very closely. Because first of all, either they're going to think the World Cup means like the World Championship, which obviously isn't, or they're going to think even the sports equivalent, World Cup, like these are the best players from the best country. But there was a fan element in voting them in. I mean, for example, when I looked at this competition, I looked at the France roster and I was like, where are like half the players? Like, some of these picks make no sense. And so now that's not a problem, since if you know the context, it's an exhibition tournament. It's just to show off the players that were voted in. It is a fan voted thing. But this is important to set up when you ask someone, for example, what does it mean where people have placed in the tournament? Because in this analogy I'm giving, you can't really like judge France and go, all right, well, yeah, they're just like a 5th to 8th level country, not that many great players from there. Obviously powerhouses like Russia must dominate the game. Like, well, no, it's obviously not the way the scene works. So what is your thoughts on, are there conclusions you can take from countries that went far or things like this in this tournament? Is there anything you come to a conclusion on?
I think for me, you have to look at the teams that probably had the most pro players on them in terms of looking at it. It's hard to judge France when you have a lot of streamers' personalities on in terms of. I mean,
put it this way. In contrast, if you looked at Finland, that was like, well, that's like nearly all the good players, right?
Right, and Sweden.
Yeah, Finland and Sweden definitely were pretty stacked. I think the biggest comeuppance there was just the idea where there was sort of this widespread belief that Korea would have a long learning period before they would really have a big showing in the scene, and then South Korea comes in the Overwatch World Cup and they dominate. So that alone just sort of did shatter some expectations, especially if you go back even a few months where there's certain people saying that Korea would take a much longer time to show up. Well, Korea played really, really well, and that was sort of a big wake-up call to the scene going, by the way, any ideas that you have that NAU are going to be the only dominant scenes and it's going to take forever for Asia to catch up, not going to be the case.
So why do you think...
Anybody who lived in Korea could have told you that. I mean, a lot of the arguments people were using were completely fucking ridiculous. Like, Koreans can't aim. Meanwhile, for like the last 5 years, Sudden Attack has been, which is a CS clone, has been the second most played game in PC bongs in Korea. There are Koreans who can aim. Just because a lot of these Asian countries, I think what's amazing about Overwatch for me is like, this is a truly global FPS that we have now, and typically the FPS scene has been fractured. Like, the Koreans don't play very much CS, the Chinese don't play very much CS, Southeast Asia doesn't play very much CS. It's been mostly a Western phenomenon, and feel free to correct me here if I'm wrong, Thorin. But it's not like Steam is not installed at the PC cafes in Korea. Certainly you can play CS, but there aren't Korean servers, just like there aren't Dota servers here in Korea. And a lot of these markets have simply been playing other titles. Like Mickey, the player who has been subbing for MV on Thailand, was the MVP of the Point Blank World Championship in 2015. And a lot of people won't know what Point Blank is. It's another CS knockoff, but it's incredibly popular in Southeast Asia, like hugely popular. And the fact that this guy was such a skilled player, the best player voted in from a world championship team, says a lot about his mechanical ability, right? So I think people were looking at it in the wrong way a lot of the time. And also you can't disrespect like Korean work ethic and how these guys know how to form esports teams, and the people who are sort of on the periphery who are coaching, even teams that haven't done well like MVP have a long history of turning pretty mediocre to bad players into championship contenders. So I think that the machine that produces the esports teams in Korea is still strong, and it's only going to get stronger as the more and more big teams come in. Like, what happens when SKT gets here, right? It's going to be bad for the West. They're really going to have to step up their game. Well,
in particular, the thing that's going to be rough for the West too is just knowing how a lot of the NAU players think when it comes to playing games like Overwatch, FPS players, and all the rest, is that they're going to be very difficult to coach up until the point where they're getting destroyed by teams that have better coaching, and they go, okay, it's a necessity, because there very much is the entire idea, if you talk with the players, all that of well, how can this guy be my coach? I'm better than him at the game. And I think just talking with you, Monty, there's been that sentiment in other games where other games have sort of had to get over that and go, okay, yeah, we actually do need a coach. We need to get over this mindset. Well, but that mindset's very prevalent right now for a lot of the NAU sides. And
I mean, I talked to a lot of the pro players at the World Cup when I was like, you guys need coaches, like, get your shit together seriously. And they're like, well, exactly. They don't even, I don't know. Like, there aren't any coaches who can coach me. And like, here's what you do, guys. You find somebody who's good at conflict resolution, who can mediate your arguments for you. He may not have the best knowledge of the game. maybe he's an older guy, but you have faith in his intelligence. And what you do is you give him 6 months and you say, your job is to review all of the film. All the players agree to listen to this guy, even when he's wrong and makes mistakes at the beginning through lack of game knowledge or whatever. But I said, I promise you guys, while you guys are all dicking around in solo queue practicing your mechanics, this guy should be watching film of you, of your opponents, trying to scout out all the other teams, stuff that you don't have time to do in your practice. And I promise you, you get somebody smart, and after 6 months of constant work with you, they are going to understand that strategy aspect of the game better than you will. But you have to give these people a chance. So you can't just complain that these people don't exist. Find the right guy for your team and give him a chance to learn. And that's where you're going to get good coaches. You have to give them that opportunity, right?
The thing is, though, that's also why it's not like assured that the West will pick up on this quickly just because they did in other games. Because I'll tell you, in League of Legends, it didn't really get until the last couple of years that every team had a coach and every coach had proper input. Because the funniest thing is the same arguments were made in League of Legends. And yet here's what's bizarre. You really could have, no one did this sadly, stopped one of these pro players like 2 or 3 years ago and said, you are aware you could destroy Coma, the SK Telecom coach, in League of Legends, right? You would destroy him. He would never lane against you. I mean, I think he was like a diamond player by the time he was the coach of SKT. You know, he wasn't like a pro. He wasn't really that great a pro player anyway. You know, so the stupid part
he was like a pro player for like one season. Then
but that's the bizarre thing. They could acknowledge that the Korean guy wasn't a top player, yet they somehow understood that the Korean guy also did have control over the team strategically, and so then they used to use that logic of like, well. What they do is they do like one of those like fucking memes from Reddit, like step 1, have a Brood War scene for 10 years. Step 2, did I say the 10 years? Question mark, lol coaches. Like, well, that guy wasn't a fucking Brood War player or a Brood War coach or in Brood War. So what happened was he had to learn and he had to become a coach and he had to learn how to become a coach. And you can only do that on the job. Like, that's the part I've never understood about that logic is like, you have to be bad to become good at anything.
To be fair, I think Coma was actually a minor Brood War player.
No, he was a StarCraft 2 player, but he might have been also a Brood War player.
Right.
He wasn't good, and he wasn't a coach.
No, he wasn't good. No. Yes, of course.
And just to add on to that, another key point here, too, is that what we'll see from a lot of NNU teams is that orgs will go and say, yeah, we have a coach. But the question is it actually a coach or is it a glorified secretary who's doing VOD recording and has no actual input over the team? The coaches actually have to be empowered to have authority over the team, to hold players accountable, to actually enforce and say we're going to run a strategy and not have it get blown off. And there's going to be a case where you'll have the appearances that teams are running good coaches, but the coaches will actually be completely fangless in running their team, which is also going to be a problem.
Right. And I told the teams, you just have to invest in this guy. Maybe you'll pick the wrong guy. Like some of you are going to pick the wrong guy. He's going to suck after 6 months. But on the way there, you just have to recognize that there are going to be bumps in the road, but the coach has to learn too. And if the coach tells you to do a strategy and it's ineffective, then the coach learns something from that experience about why it's not effective, right? And won't make that same mistake again, hopefully. So,
well, plus think of it this way: it's like this. Say the three of us all had teams, and we all want to get coaches, right? But for whatever, ZP and his team thinks that, my team doesn't really need a coach, and plus I don't really know anyone who's good enough to get, and we also don't really know anyone good, right? But what we say, listen, ZP, we're all going to make an agreement that all three of us are going to get a coach, right? And we're all going to give him 6 months, and this coach is going to have, some say in the strategy, and he's going to work his way up, and what we're going to do is, at the end of the 6 months, then we'll decide whether we keep the guy or fire the guy. Now, the way I would convince you to get your coach is I would say it doesn't matter if your coach sucks, because if my coach ends up being better and your org has more money than me, you can now take my coach. I've actually trained your coach for you, and I've test drived him, and I found all the problems. So actually, that's what's funny in the West is, unfortunately, it involves thinking bigger than yourself, but you will inevitably, by giving enough people chances, you will be able, and this is why I'm saying I would convince him that way. You almost have to, appeal to his cynical side. Remember how you do it with players? If you let a player go onto a team, and the team gets good, and they're not quite as big as you steal the player, don't you? Do that with coaches.
And the thing is, too, is that players are known to socialize with each other. If they feel like their coach is actually helping them, guess what? They're going to be talking with other players and going, hey, yeah, our coach is actually being really helpful. And then eventually when it comes time when the org is getting coached, be like, yeah, can we get someone like this coach here? I keep hearing good things about him. Our coach sucks compared to this guy. Here's the criteria we want from a coach. And then it just sort of grows from there.
Okay, so to write it back in then, what ZP? If you had to outline broad strokes, why did South Korea win the Overwatch World Cup?
Well, I mean, there was a few reasons, right? Number one is that they were one of the teams that were they were taking their practice time more seriously than some of the other teams there when they were going in. They had a clear team leader that was actually telling them what to do, and they were listening to it. Because, I mean, you had in the Overwatch World Cup, you had all sorts, right? Some of the teams where some teams are just sort of there. They're like, okay, whatever, we're not going to play too much. We're just having a fun experience. You know, some teams are going out more than others. There was a whole, like, variety of how seriously teams were taking it, but on that spectrum, South Korea was definitely taking it more seriously than the other teams.
I feel like that's a microcosm of like South Korea and the West as it is. Like even in a fucking exhibition tournament, they practiced and had a team leader. Like I think we're already starting to see what we've done there. Is it's like we've brought chess to the end game of like 3 moves, and we're seeing who can actually play the game at this point. Okay, so Monty, what would you cite as some reasons as to why South Korea won?
I mean, all pro players, Koreans, we've seen this in LoL, League of Legends, like they usually try and vote in their best players as opposed to favorite players. Esports is inextricably linked with these fan votes in Korea all the time because esports is so popular. And the fans really have a lot of pride in Korea, want Korea to win. So that was a big part of it. Also, I think the work ethic thing was huge. I think a lot of the Western teams could have done better if they had been practicing harder. Not that I fault them. I mean, it's a show match. Like, I don't really care either. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it was fun, but it's not really about who won. As you noted on Twitter, Thorin, there was no prize pool for this. All the players were paid, like $3,000 to attend.
I mean, there are more things to compete for in life than a few shekels that are passed through your hands into a vendor's hands. I mean, some would say there are higher ideals, such as excellence. Expressing human potential, Just me. Maybe I'm old-fashioned like that, Monty.
Hey, I will say that the medals were sick too. It's not forgetting.
Yeah, and sick medals. See,
the point is that there wasn't. Yes, you can compete for excellence, but the point I'm making is that all the players were compensated the same for this event, and so there wasn't money to fight for. It was mostly like I think a good opportunity for the players to socialize amongst each other, get a feel for each other, and more celebrate the start of this new game. But that said, the Koreans took it super seriously, like really seriously, and they definitely spent a lot of time practicing for this event, reviewing other players. I'd stand there and watch VODs of their opponents' individual plays and other tournaments. The work ethic was definitely there. So also they just found a combination of players that happened to click immediately too and really work well together.
Well, in terms of that combination too, and it's also you look at the roles that are being played. They also had players that are filling into roles where they were mostly comfortable with, compared to say Team Germany that had a lot of good players, but then they didn't have players that were they had too many in one role as opposed to actually having a good mix. So it was just a complete mess in terms of who was playing what.
So who would you highlight on the South Korea team? Which players stood out in their role?
Miro. I think Miro probably wasn't he voted MVP at the very end. Like he was definitely for me the hero of the South Korean team just because it was really good Winston play, and to top it all off, like the West was NA and EU haven't had Winston play of that caliber, so it was sort of a double whammy. So Miro definitely stood out.
I liked watching Arhan outside of Africa Blue because I feel like he has to carry so much weight on Africa Blue from the DPS role that when we saw him combined with Eska, it opened up so much more space for him. And I think we saw a lot of what he could be if he was on a team with a better co-DPS player than Taejun.
Okay. Because one of the things as a rank amateur watching the tournament that I noticed was it actually kind of confirmed a theory I already had about the South Korean teams, which is that I think part of the reason why there isn't a South Korean team that will dominate right now is that the talent seems to be split up among a bunch of teams, and at the moment they're just like going through. They haven't figured that out themselves at the moment. Okay, they still think the team unit will win through, and this guy will get better. But at the moment, if you wanted to make like the best team, and not like an all-star team, but literally a real team that would work the best from South Korea, you wouldn't take one whole team from like Lunatic-hai or Africa Blue. You would pick apart some of these pieces, and it's just happened. Some of them were in this World Cup team. It seemed to me.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think that that's just part of, the nascence of this scene right now in Korea is that they weren't really, unlike a lot of the Western teams, they weren't really playing in beta. right? So some of them were, but not as. It was more structured in the West in terms of the beta play. So they sort of had a late start, I would say. And a lot of these players were switching games at the time from like Arhan was like a Heroes of the Storm pro, right? Who apparently has amazing aim too. That was a surprise, right? For him to go from Heroes of the Storm to projectile DPS that's pretty impressive in a period of time. But the swaps that we were seeing players make, I think that a lot of these guys sort of just landed on random teams, and it took the first season of Apex to really see, okay, well, this guy's going to be really good. And I think we're going to see a big roster shuffle as soon as Apex ends, well, where some of the top teams with the teams with more money try to consolidate, or what we'll see is that teams like KT and Samsung and SK Telecom are going to come in and just like try and form super teams off of what they see. Because usually that's what happens. Like in League, a lot of the big orgs, CJ, they waited for a couple of seasons of champions, and then when they saw the teams that they like really wanted to pick up, or of course famously SK Telecom T12 formed around Faker, and then they took like Impact, and they kind of wait until the dust settles and then start cherry picking teams to put together out of the sort of rubble of the more amateur scene that existed before it.
Sure. So, okay, is there someone in the tournament, since we did have some players who aren't playing for top teams and aren't going to like win the next big Western event, who's the player who is someone who maybe isn't usually highlighted or isn't on a top team and stood out in this tournament? Is there someone else who kind of caught your eye during the tournament, ZP?
Well, I think this is sort of low-hanging fruit given recent events, but you take a look at some of the Team Thailand players where you have Mickey, literally was noticed by Envious because of his play in the Overwatch World Cup, came in as a sub. There's no way he's subbing in for Envious without the Overwatch World Cup being a thing, and then he was very instrumental in their victory over Rogue just last night, so I feel like any answer other than Mickey might be wrong here.
Well, I think the Thai team was actually a lot stronger than people thought. Like, Oputo, too, was super good from the Thai team. So I think there are a couple of Thai players. I think it was cool that we got to see them because these are guys that are probably ready to play on pro teams right now. So, yeah, I think I agree. Like, some of the Thai players definitely were the biggest surprises from the tournament.
Okay, so then, I mean, we're already discussing it. So let's lead into the OGN playoffs then. So obviously we had these first rounds, best of 5 series. I mean, the big match obviously was the upset of Envious beating Rogue. To what extent was that actually an upset, Monty?
I mean, it's a huge upset. Like, so let me get a side rant out of the way beforehand. So side rant commencing now. Even though Envy won, I think what Tailspin did to his team was complete shit. I think that the fact that 3 out of 4 Western teams had roster changes either immediately before or during the event is complete shit. None of the Korean teams had roster changes during their course of play in this tournament. They treated it like a professional event and a commitment that once it was made had to be followed through with until the end. And it's not, Tailspin I think was very disingenuous in his like twit-longer post about, oh, it's fine if he's not comfortable with the team. But the fact is that basically it was a last-second decision. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going home after the Overwatch World Cup and I'm not going to play for you guys. It was like the same day that his flight was, that he decided, no, I'm just not going to fly back to Korea now. Good luck, guys. Lol. Like, it's appalling to me. And all that same shit happened to Reunited, where they had to get Onigot in. At least it happened before the tournament. But if this team is having problems, Tailspin could have done, at least Energy, I think, handled it the best, in that the problems with Energy existed before the Overwatch World Cup, but Gods and Pooks came to Korea to play with the team, and so that Energy would at least have the Overwatch World Cup period to try and find players. And if Tailspin had said, oh, sorry guys, like I'm going to go play for Team USA, I'm going to give you these 2 weeks to find a new player, that's not what happened. This was like red alert status, swap things. And I think I'm calling out the pro players, like, yeah, there's no good time to swap these teams, because his argument to me on Twitter was, well, there's just commitment after commitment. Okay, Say you're leaving the team after Apex. Just do that. Just play the rest of Apex, man. Just play the rest of Apex. Swap before MLG Vegas. Give your team some time. It's not like you made a professional commitment to this team. And I respect the fact that you want to leave, and I hope Tailspin does well and gets on a team that fits him better. But, like, come on. Like, grow the fuck up. Seriously.
So everything you just brought up, I definitely... Let me say this. I don't disagree, but to go into, I think you do have a case where you have a lot of players that haven't been involved in all the rest. And I think there were tensions on Envy, particularly with Tailspin and some people, I mean, it probably was Tailspin Taimu, that were just bubbling over a very long period of time. It's sort of like, all right, I'll get out after this event. Oh crap, another event. I'll get out after this event. Oh crap, another event. And it's something that clearly built over time. And I agree, it definitely could have been handled better. But I think there's also an idea that even though Tailspin has been in competitive games for a long time, to be on the grind that you are in Overwatch, it's kind of unprecedented. And I don't think people necessarily handle it in the best of ways.
I mean, I think this is just like a classic pattern, though, which is that the team that when they're winning everything, suddenly magically those personalities that don't get along, it's all fine. And even though I don't, we figured it out, man. And then as soon as you start losing, then suddenly it's like whatever the expiration date is just turns to zero. It's like it has to happen now. One thing I did actually have to say that I thought people would do harsh on Tailspin over was like the notion that he's not allowed to publicly call out the fact that Taimu was the player that he didn't like to play with or whatever. Like, it's one thing to leave the team. I agree, I think that's bullshit. You don't leave your team in the lurch. Like, let's say it was this one player you didn't like. Well, why are you fucking all the rest of your teammates over, Like, they want to win as well, so wait till after the tournament. But one thing I will say I think is bullshit is because people like Taimu, for some reason they, like, if... obviously, we have to speculate to do this, but if we assume Tailspin wasn't lying, and by the way, you'll notice Taimu did not himself come out and say, that's all lies. Like, it's not the case that I didn't want to practice. He even said, we had like different views on how to practice and how to play the game. If I was stuck with a guy for weeks and weeks and he doesn't practice much or thinks that you don't have to, or is even like philosophically against the concept of certain, like maybe scouting VODs or something or doing extra work, if then we got like... Because remember, I doubt this just happened overnight. Whatever scenario precipitated the split, where one of them decided, I will not continue under these circumstances, I don't personally see an issue with you going, this guy's full of shit. Like, I just wasted my time with this guy, and now I'm having to leave the team over him. I don't think that's as big a crime as people made out.
No, I wouldn't say so. I will say that, and this is, with all due respect to Tailspin, I go way back with all the rest, though, I do wonder if there's a little bit of pattern here. Because you touched on one really important thing, which is that being on the number one team, then not being on the number one team, then having issues breaking up, this would be the second go-around for Tailspin in that regard, because you go back to Envious 1.0, where they were, of course, hubris back in Beta 1. They had a whole lot of power behind them and all the rest. And then they do really well. Then suddenly they're getting challenged by other teams in the scene, like your IDD QDs, stop playing, then miraculously, okay, we've had team issues, break up. And I don't know exactly what Tailspin's role in that, but that might have been more than people realized. And then you have the second case here where Envy 2.0 doing super well, suddenly having issues, not winning lanes, etc., then off the team. And there's been a few cases like that in the Overwatch scene. So do wonder how deep that goes in that regard.
Okay, so the actual match then. Obviously, I mean, with how it was recently, Rogue had better results than Envious as it was. But with the old lineups, if it had just been an amazing game, it's not like people thought Envious couldn't beat them. But to do it with a stand-in, what is the implication of this? What do you think of that?
I think the biggest thing is that it probably wouldn't have happened without the patch hitting right in the middle of the tournament. I think it really leveled the playing field, took away some of the coordination strategies that people had, and also, quite honestly, played in Envy's hands because Mickey was not coming in there as a projectile DPS god. He was coming there an off-tank. And projectile DPS, it feels like you could get away without having a really high-class projectile DPS in this particular meta that's evolving, or at least the way teams are playing it right now. So for Envy, I think it was the perfect set of circumstances where they could have Taimu and Harry Hook on double hit scan DPS if they wanted to, or put Taimu in the Roadhog, put Mickey on the off-tank, flex Internet Hulk. It worked out really well for them, but if they had to play on the previous patch, I don't think it goes anywhere near as well.
No, I agree entirely. And I think that it really is important to contextualize this because I think there are two scenarios where this doesn't work, weirdly. I think they lose if Tailspin is playing, which is weird, right? But I think that Envy not figured out. I mean, they got Mickey because he was close in Thailand, had some sort of relationship with some of the players from the Overwatch World Cup. And he happened to be a D.Va god, and D.Va happened to be super strong on this patch. So running him 100% on D.Va was a useful strategy that they sort of lucked into. And that was fortunate, very fortunate for them. But like, also, I agree. I think Roadhog, under current circumstances, is super strong because if you try and run Reaper right now, so first off, there are several things that happen to Reaper. If we think about like Roadhog counters, Reaper is league coach. Reaper is obviously a big one, and Reaper doesn't do well into D.Va. Like, no, like gets wrecked by D.Va. You can't deal any damage to her because of her barrier. You can't ult because of her barrier. Also, Reaper was indirectly nerfed by the removal of move speed on the Ana ult, so he can't get into position as easier now. In fact, that's why we see it more effective to nano boost heroes like D.Va or particularly Soldier, because Soldier can reposition quickly using his sprint and then get into position to use the tac visor better, right? So Soldier is a much better source for nano boost because he has built-in move speed. D.Va has built-in move speed. Winston has built-in like movement capabilities, right? Even Genji still a valid target for the nano boost, but Reaper really got hurt because he can't, and Reinhardt, because they can't just run into people and chase them down anymore. And even though Reinhardt can move with charge, he can't actually deal damage during the charge. And if you miss it, you just wasted a bunch of your nano boost. So it's kind of not great. That's the other thing I think hurt Rogue was Reinforce's way of playing Reinhardt was punished pretty hard by what Envy was doing, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So like that's the whole thing here. Is I think that this was a perfect storm of them having the right players, and Taimu being definitely one of the best Roadhog players in the world, Mickey being an amazing D.Va, and then having Harry Hook, who can play Soldier, who's known for his like Soldier and McCree play when he plays DPS. And these are all heroes that are really viable right now, and I think they got real lucky. They got real lucky.
Actually, just to pile on that, Harry Hook, Soldier is basically his pet, like, secret lover. Yeah. Even Soldier isn't all that great. He practices a whole lot, likes playing Soldier. Even played it back in the day when Soldier was used a little bit more in the meta, and would flex on that every now and then for Envy. So it's like,
he was playing that in Apex before the buff.
Yeah, exactly. So now you have a situation where it's like, okay, we are down a DPS player, but a magical patch has just hit, and Soldier's amazing. All right, we just put Harry Hook on this and let's go. And it was, as Monty said, it's a perfect storm.
Okay. Well, then as a quick sidebar then, if you had to speculate, which Western teams do you think this will help or hurt the current patch as it is? Like who has the right personnel to benefit from the impact of this, and who will be damaged a bit more?
So any team that has good hit scan DPS, I think benefits. Any team that's reliant on more projectile DPS has huge problems. I'd say that this patch is probably, for a team that's already been struggling, this patch is probably an absolute nightmare for NRG. Because now with the Seagull, of course, his bread and butter is running projectile heroes. He's not really the most shutdown hit scan player. He's had an okay Soldier from time to time, but historically they haven't done well as projectile characters are not doing well. So for NRG, this probably is one of the absolute worst things that can happen.
Well, it's also, you need a strong tank line, because like we're going to see a lot of teams running 3 or 4 tanks in this meta. So honestly, NIP was already on the rise. NIP probably is a huge beneficiary of this patch.
Yeah, I was just talking about NIP, and this is where it's interesting, because there was talking in the pro scene where people mentioned multi-tank comps and all the rest, where they note that a lot of teams actually still struggle to run multi-tank comps as well as they can. They end up having to revert back to 3-2-1s, 2-2-2s, and they can't run all that well, where NIP is just like, we were running this even when it wasn't meta, so now we're super happy to run it here, which probably makes them a favorite going things like DreamHack going forward.
Sure. I mean, obviously people, NIP I noticed is the team that are like the players team, where if you look at the other players, they're all like, this team's really good, all this. They haven't obviously had the big placings at the big tournaments so far. I mean, for example, a lot of the really good players from NIP obviously were on the Finland team in the World Cup. So this is the right time for a team like NIP to rise up.
Absolutely. And the NIP, it's really been a great sort of story for them anyways, where they were a team known as SG1 for a really long period of time. They sort of struggled, were getting top 8 finishes, but never really number 1. And then they got picked up by NIP and almost had this sort of sponsorship surge where they started doing really well in the Overwatch Open. And they've been on a consistent uptick ever since, and now they're poised to potentially take the title as best team in EU, if not more.
Okay, so one of the results that was quite shocking to me was actually the Lunatic-hai loss, where they were just swept 3-0. Monty, Lunatic-hai before this was a team that people were saying, this is going to be the best Korean team, and they could really contend for the title. How did they get just swept outright?
So we say swept, but that was a really close 3-0. Like a lot of those maps really could have gone either way, went down to the wire, and it could have easily been a Lunatic-hai 3-0 too. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. So it was incredibly close.
But I mean, beforehand, you didn't have Kongdu Uncia as like, they might win the tournament or whatever, right?
No, it was hard to get so here's why it was hard to get a read on Kongdu Uncia. So first off, they lose to BK Stars in their first match, 3-2. Right? It's a close series, super exciting, was good, but they take the loss. But that was on October 7th, so that's 6 weeks ago, basically. Now they don't play for a while. Then they play MVP Space, and they 3-0 them. MVP Space is the worst team in Apex, so okay, whatever. 3-0 doesn't really matter. They sweep them. Their MVP Space doesn't get any points on any maps. So the next opponent is NRG. Like two days after they get to Korea with their new roster, they had 1 day of practice, and they sweep NRG, and they have good play, and they do it again in a total shutout without them taking any points. But because they played against a very weak team, and then a team that maybe is weak, but at least was weak at the time, it was very difficult to get a read. Now, you compound this with the fact that in the Asia qualifiers for MGA Arena, which is the upcoming tournament that ZP is going to be casting in London, for the Asia regionals for that tournament, Kongdu Panthera qualified by beating Kongdu Uncia, and we know Kongdu Panthera was having a lot of teamwork problems at the time. So there's like another question for you is, why was Panthera beating Uncia? Certainly it could be one of those weird sister team kryptonite things, but there was nothing to point to the fact besides talking to the pro players who were here in Korea and them telling us that Kongdu Uncia was super good, that they would be at a level to beat Lunatic-hai.
Now, one thing, I haven't gotten a chance to watch the series yet because I had to go to bed last night towards the end and all the rest. And
yeah, sure.
Tried and all the rest. But basically, you were watching it. How much did the new patch actually affect Lunatic-hai?
Hugely, right. Because here's the thing. Arhan was playing like 70% of his time on Genji coming into this match. Or, I mean, not Arhan. When we see Taejun, he was switching back to the Genji, and he had been focusing on the Roadhog. But Kongdu Uncia, Birdring played just straight up, like pound for pound, better Roadhog during that match. And also, I think Dance was a player who's been really underrated. If you actually look at his play time, he plays like 4 or 5 heroes pretty much evenly in a lot of the games. His hero pool is actually enormous. And Lunatic-hai, they struggle with sometimes their hero pool, particularly with Taejun, and they do a lot of like tank swapping, and Miro seems to be trying to like save the team a lot of the time by swapping roles or swapping to different heroes to cover up for his teammates' deficiencies. But Uncia, they had the better coordination too, better engages over the course of the map. I mean, it was impressive to see them do that well. I would have never expected it.
So let me ask you this, since we've mentioned the patch coming midterm and all the rest. Basically, what should the approach be in terms of patches going forward for Overwatch? Because, I mean, there's a lot of different theories and all the rest, but I kind of feel like the lead time for this patch dropping into when the teams played wasn't particularly fair to the teams that were front runners going in. And
there's a reason why you have a tournament realm where things are disabled for a couple of weeks before they actually hit the pro scene. First off, so you don't have crazy bugs. Like the day that the patch dropped, first off, it couldn't have happened at a worse time. It was before the last day of groups. So you play all of the group stage except for 1 day on a different patch, and then you switch it. Like switching before quarterfinals is a lot better than switching. And because tournaments are as long as Apex is, you're going to have patch changes. Like you just accept that. It's going to happen maybe once, maybe twice, right? But swapping before playoffs, obviously not ideal, but better than trying to partition out the group stages. or like having different patches over the same group stage, because you want the teams qualifying for the playoffs on one patch, right? It sucks that the teams who qualified for the playoffs may not be the ones who qualified for the playoffs if the same patch was used the entire time, right? That's problematic in and of itself, that on the new patch, we may not have even seen Lunatic-hai qualify for playoffs. It could have been Conbox and Envious out of Group C if it was this more tank-focused meta that we're dealing with right now. Or hit scan tank-focused, whatever you want to call it. So I'm not a fan of this at all. I'm not a fan of heroes that are just being released being available for professional play, like Sombra, because there are bugs. That's what you got disabled because of the bug with Lucio ults. And there was on patch day, I was literally sitting there at noon in Korea. It's 7 hours, and I see fucking Zenyatta's getting 6 transcendences because when they have their orbs on people, if damage is dealt, or like if they had like a healing orb on somebody and that person was dealing damage, you got ult charge. So they'd get like 6 or 7 transcendences per map, and I was like, is this bug going to be fixed by the time that I have to cast a professional match tonight? Fortunately, it was, but what the fuck?
Dude, I was in the same boat for that, because the first Alienware monthly melee for EU, where it's expanding out, having an EU tournament, which is awesome, by the way, but we spent all this time getting set up, and it's like, yeah, so Zenyatta might be getting 1 billion ults per game going in. This is I remember messaging a few people, but I was like, please, like, hotfix anything. It's like, I don't know if we will. And then thankfully they did, but it was sort of this moment of terror. It's like, well, we probably have to go through with it on day one. Yep, it's going to suck. But thankfully it didn't. But still, the prospect was terrifying.
Yeah, and this is why you have separate tournament servers that have different patches that are slower to adapt, so you can fix these problems for the professional scene, so we don't just have a clown fiesta on our hands. And it just needs to happen. Like, the patch cycle, it can't happen at that particular moment. You need to pick and choose when the patches are going to drop, right? And you can't just have it tied to the live server, otherwise it ends up in just awful situations.
Okay, so now that Envious pulled off the win, and now that Lunatic-hai is out, how, if you have to predict now, does the rest of OGM play out? Like, who is the obvious champion now?
Kongdu, maybe? I mean, that's the world we live in, where it's hard to say, because teams had such a small amount of time to adapt to this patch in the playoffs that there may still be stuff that's being discovered by the pro players. But it was interesting that Lunatic-hai and Kongdu had such a similar play style and similar compositions, right? But still possible that we might see some more further innovations. Also, I don't think Sombra's going to see a lot of use, but who knows? Sombra will be re-enabled for the semifinals, so it adds another wrinkle for teams to consider. I do think that after what I've seen so far, that Kongdu is now probably the favorite. But I'm not.
I mean, would it be reasonable to say the winner
100%.
of the second semi, the one that's not Africa Blues and BK Stars, probably wins the tournament?
Probably, yes.
Going on that, I think Monty's probably on the right track here. I mean, for me, it's always hard, though, when you're doing predictions when teams are really close and on an in-person environment. I remember doing predictions in the middle of Overwatch Open, which was still an evolving meta where people are just getting used to on all the rest. It was actually just pure hell trying to figure out who was going to win what, because A, you didn't know how teams are going to react on the in-person environment. Still, there's a lot more variability there than there is online, straight up, and you can just look to the results and see that. And then 2 is that I remember, just to sort of use an example, where even though Ana was around for a while, it wasn't until Overwatch Open where people realized, we're just going to throw it on Reaper every time. And then it turned into Beyblade constantly. Will there be sleep darts? And teams weren't all that proficient at yet. So it sort of took control of the entire tournament. There's always that X factor, as Monty mentioned, where now Sombra's in. Maybe something really ridiculous comes out Sombra and it dictates the semifinals. So I think on paper, you probably gives a slight edge to Kongdu, but just natural variability in Overwatch plus new meta stuff, Envy comes out and wins it all, not going to be that surprised.
Yeah. So, Monty, it sounded like you were down on Africa Blue a little bit. So, I mean, obviously, Reunited did have the situation with the roster change. So what did you actually make of them so far? Like, have you gotten on board a bit more?
No, I think they have engage issues. And I think you can't have engage issues on this patch. I think that Africa, they still get on payload maps in particular really strung out and isolated. Like they They will walk in one by one. They'll be too far away from their teammates. They don't know how to engage properly. I think on control maps, they're fucking amazing because when everybody's just constantly fighting on those control maps, their aggressive style works really well. But they have issues communicating when they're engaging, when they're going in. So sometimes, some of their players are way too far away from their tank line, and they just get focused and killed on some of the longer maps, right? So I don't know. I'm not too high on them. BK Stars is an interesting team because they're very good at ult combos. And I think that they're one of the better teams at ult economy management in the world. So that's exciting for them. But they are perhaps overly reliant on actually having great ult combos or for running Bunny on Tracer, right? So it's a little bit... I don't know. I see some pretty big flaws in both of those teams, whereas I think Envy and Kongdu Uncia are just more complete on the other side, even though Envy has been running with the substitute players. In this meta, Mickey seems to be working well, and he can just play Zarya or D.Va, I think, for the rest of the tournament if he wants to.
It's funny you mentioned ult economy and then bring up Envy in the same sense, just because I know historically looking at Envy, that's been one of their big downsides, where Envy has never really played with ult economy in mind. They just sort of play the win fights, and I think not only was that harmful last patch, but this upcoming patch, teams that actually go out of their way to look at ult economy, how they want to play it, and all the rest, it's going to be far more important because you simply don't have as many ults in the game. Yeah. And if you're in a situation where, look, we just do a junk rush, we'll come with 4 ults, and there's no way they'll be able to respond when you're at period of advantage, it's going to be a big deal. But there's still too many times here where just looking at tournaments recently, whether it be Apex-related games, just some stuff last night, or just the tournaments that have been going in NA and EU where I've been seeing teams rising up, you still have situations where it's very, granted, it's spectator view, we see everything, but there's still a situation where it's like, wow, you guys have 2 ultimates versus 4, just hold on to this, don't use it. And then, of course, they go and use that. Even on cast, it's like, well, they should hold on to it here, but they're probably going to burn it. They burn it, they lose the fight, and they're even worse position where they could have just saved it. And it just feels like teams don't always pay too much attention to ult economy.
Who do you think's doing a good job on that? Who's leading the way in that sense? Who's the more disciplined?
Kongdu was super good yesterday. Kongdu was really solid on that front. In the past, I think Africa Blue and BK Stars have also been pretty good. I think BK Stars, like I said, is very, very good at it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking here if I can offer any examples on the NA-EU side that are doing really well, just as a little bit of contrast rather than going the Apex stuff. But it's really hard because it's really been one of the Achilles heels of the NA, the EU scene, where teams just don't always think about it. I'd actually say that some of the newer teams have been doing a surprisingly good job of it. It's sort of been their bread and butter. Like you look at the teams coming up, Immortals, Kingdom, Rise. Okay. They've been doing a surprisingly good job of it relative to some of the established teams at points, which is probably why they've been having much better results. That's sort of the dark horse story of NA and EU. While you've been having all these events, while you've been having Apex, all the rest, you have been having this new set of teams coming up that have actually been surprising people pretty regularly.
So in theory, we don't know if Envious does stay with this player, what they do at this point in time. Obviously, they were the team that had all eyes on them thanks to the online results. What do you actually think is the future of Envious? Do you think that should they just stick with this player? Do you think they will bring someone in, another NA player in? What do you think? Which way do they go with this?
I don't know. I think it just depends on their results. Frankly, I think that if they're capable of winning this tournament for Mickey, in a way they have. I think in a way you just give him a shot at that point in time, right? As part of your full-time roster. If you don't, I think somebody will pick up Mickey who is more in need of a dedicated off-tank player. But I think Harry needs to move to a full-time DPS position. If you can have Harry and Taimu, then you can try and rebuild the team around it. And Hulk did very well on Lucio and Winston last night.
So this is where I'm going to disagree with you on that note. I think for this meta right now, Harry and Taimu DPS works fine.
That's true.
Neither of them have proven themselves to be really adept projectile players. So if they go all in, they sign Mickey and keep the roster completely the same as it is now, they could be awesome for the remainder of this meta if it does turn out to be more projectile focused. But then if you get a new projectile hero or suddenly things become much more about Pharah or Genji, then I think Envy is kind of screwed. So I
don't think they're screwed. I think that they have time. They have time for Taimu to learn how to play projectile DPS. I think you give the dude a month and he'll be just fine on it.
It's hard to say because projectile DPS and hit scan DPS, while you do have some players like TviQ and Surefour that can really go back and forth and play pretty well, Surefour in particular on hit scan like is amazing and still can do good projectile DPS. Not every good hit scan DPS player can flex to projectile. Maybe TviQ could. I mean, he's a pretty talented guy all in all, but I don't think you can assume that he would suddenly be able to turn into a world beater Genji that could even be, somewhat equivalent to, say, the Shadowburns of the world. So,
I mean, does he need to, you're making an assumption that he needs to be a Shadowburn in order for Envy to be good. I mean, can he be a passable? Here's a different question. With this lineup, if Mickey is this good at off tank, and you have Harry, who's been amazing on a lot of these hit scan, and you have a player like TviQ who could, in theory, become a passable projectile player and a very good Roadhog, do you need that world beater player with this roster? I would say you don't.
I mean, need is an interesting word there. I mean, certainly they could win games and do very well with that roster up until a point, but the question is that if someone builds a more complete team where they can run a really good projectile DPS and have and basically have everything else, then it puts them at a disadvantage. And we talk a lot about Overwatch, how having the ability to flex into different roles depending on the meta and just throw different looks at your opponent is important. It's not that Envy is suddenly going to fall off the face of the world, but if they run into a meta where they do need that shutdown projectile player and they don't have one on their team, it could really cripple them at points going forward.
Isn't it kind of a waste of TviQ's skills as well if he doesn't become incredibly good at it?
Sure.
I mean, that's like an issue right there in terms of the player, right? If the player himself doesn't buy into just I'm just going to do what I need for the team. I mean, he seems like a player where he wants to do what he wants to do.
No, it's definitely another wrinkle to it. I'm trying to say that it's not out of the question that they would permanently pick up Mickey, particularly if this team does very well and actually wins Apex. Then I think they will probably give him a crack. Now, if we're going to talk about other potential players for this Envy roster that would be more projectile plug and play, everybody goes back to their old positions. They don't pick up Mickey. I think the obvious choices are they get TviQ back if they can,
yes.
Right? In a perfect world, they get TviQ back from Rogue, put him back in. This is where they were before, right? But TviQ is such an incredibly talented player, or they get a player like Seagull. There's actually a pretty short list of guys that could fill Tailspin's role, like almost pure projectile players that would couple well with TviQ, and I think that Seagull and TviQ are probably at the top of that list.
What about Cypher?
Cypher, I'm not necessarily sure. The problem with Cypher and a lot of the older Quake people is that they've had decent results at points, but they've never really been on a top team ever. And there's probably reasons for that in communications. Otherwise, it's a complicated issue, but I don't know if you'd be one of my go-to people there. I would say it'd be more likely, if not the people that Monte mentioned, where TviQ, I think, would probably be the number one choice by far to fill if they had to just grab a projectile DPS. There are interesting prospects coming in from the teams I mentioned before, sort of the three rising NAU teams that have been rising the shadows of these events where they could steal. Like, for example, for Rise, you have a player by the name of Spirit that's really been showing very impressive, versatile play where you can play Roadhog, you can play Reaper, you can play really good Genji. If the players like those aren't locked down the good contracts to orgs that might not have as much money, that could also be an acquisition piece where we'll have to see where that goes. But bear in mind, Fnatic is also in the market for a projectile DPS, and we haven't been talking too much about them, but the IDDQD leaving the roster has actually led them to a situation where they could try and fill that hole. So,
okay, so let's talk about that then. What did you think of this move? I mean, obviously, famously, if people have seen the clip with you, Narc, you are a proponent of the fact that IDDQD is a fantastic player, right?
Yeah, IDDQD is great. I mean, the day after that argument, he went in and basically single-handedly shut down Seagull and Hanamura and had one of the best McCree games in the entire tournament. So him leaving the team is definitely a blow. However, talking to people on Fnatic, putting aside the personal reasons as to why the departure might have happened, they also had a lot of overlap on the team where they always felt handicapped that they could never pull out a really, really good projectile DPS because Buds and IDDQD have very similar skill sets.
Yeah.
So for Fnatic, they sort of see it as we are losing a really good player, but this is also an opportunity to get a player that might let us run more versatile team comps and be stronger as a whole.
So what do you think the future for IDDQD is then?
That's a really good question where I don't know where IDDQD lands right now. I feel like you look at teams that are not having a whole lot of results and have a lot of money. I think, for example, if NRG continues their slump, that he would probably be an ideal fit for there if NRG wants to throw a boatload of money at him, and also potentially pay the Fnatic buyout, where who knows where that stands. IDDQD, I think, probably feels he can get out of the buyout without it being paid, but I don't really know.
No. The owners of Fnatic are not going to allow that to happen. That's a good joke.
That's generally where I stand on that. I know that he feels he can get out of it, but I don't know if that's actually a thing.
I would be shocked if that was true. Like, after just as a former team owner myself, after you invest that much money into a player, and you're talking to other team owners that can certainly, Energy can certainly afford to pay that buyout. It's like, you got to recoup your costs somewhere, man, and that's how you do it. So if Energy wants him, they will certainly be paying a buyout. I think Energy, I was going to mention Energy too, just because who knows how that roster is going to gel, and that's the kind of player that they need right now.
Well, particularly if you go into Vegas, and this is a case where, again, you have been having the NA scene sort of revamp itself. The new C9, we haven't even talked about that, where the new C9 actually has been looking very, very good in recent times.
Mm-hmm. I don't put much emphasis on these fucking online results. Like, we can say that, but beating FaZe when FaZe is on 200 ping on two of their players in a final, like, that doesn't impress me, frankly. Like, I'm waiting to see the C9 that exists at MLG Vegas. That's what I want to see, and then we'll see how they are then, right?
C9 has a lot to prove at in-person environments where they've sort of not had good results, both at Gamescom and at down in Atlanta for the Overwatch Open. So I totally agree with you that they need that, but they have still been looking impressive with more holes filled than what they had before in their previous roster.
Okay, but so then let me frame it this way then, ZP. So NRG is a team where obviously they've been massively criticized. Like, people think the name of the team is bigger than the actual results have been. Then you add in, obviously they were invited to a recent Asian competition where some people would have said, maybe there should have been some better European teams invited. But I almost feel like the only thing that's the saving grace is that initially, if I told you a month ago that they go out of this OGN group, people would be like, wow, they are total shit. But they've been saved by the fact the two teams that went out ahead of them have actually done pretty well. They've got to the semi-finals. So that is almost like you got to get out of jail free card. Problem is, if you go into this Vegas event and you bomb it, now there's sort of no excuse, right? Now it is the Western competition.
Well, the funny shit that happened was that if we were to say, what is, after the group stage was complete in Apex, what is the weakest group? Everybody says Group B, right? Everybody, sure. VK Stars and Kongdu.
Reasonably so.
Reasonably so. Yet, in the actual quarterfinals, all of the second seeds won, except for BK Stars, the only first seed from any of the four groups to advance to semifinals, and both of those teams emerged out of Group B. Like, now part of this is BK Stars had the weakest quarterfinal opponent, and Kongdu Uncia was like secretly super good, unlikely, but yeah, it is a bizarre. You don't normally see tournaments shake out this way. This has been huge upsets in this tournament.
So I would say this, going to MLG Vegas and looking at the teams that are involved, I kind of feel like MLG Vegas is almost a deathmatch, like Team Survivor type situation with a lot of these teams where if the
loser
teams
leaves
go in,
town, okay,
loser gets thrown off their organization.
Okay.
I think it is that serious, because you look at a team like Team Liquid, they've been together for a while, but they haven't had the results that Team Liquid would like to see out of their team. So if Team Liquid gets taken out really early, it doesn't have good results, they're probably getting redone. Complexity has been missing in a lot of online tournaments and throwing all their cards behind performance at in-person events. I don't see them switching up their team between DreamHack and DreamHack and Vegas. But if Complexity has a bad showing, particularly if they don't do well at DreamHack and then they go to Vegas and they just don't do well, that's probably going to be on the chopping block. NRG, where they were on the tour in China and Korea, if they go in and say they lose to an upstart like Rise Nation, that's really bad. So there's a lot of teams with a lot to prove at MLG Vegas. And I feel like the teams that end up on the lower half, there's going to be dramatic changes to pretty much any team that's 5 through 8.
Also, it's the last major tournament of the year, presumably, as we head into Christmas and New Year's. So there's going to be a lot of time for teams to start making changes. Like, there will be a break, right, where teams are going to have more of an opportunity to actually start making those changes before the tournaments start up again in January. And that's going to be that's going to be a nice time, I think, for a lot of these orgs to retool what they're doing. And moreover, now that the Overwatch league has been announced, a lot of these teams are probably going to try and lock up player contracts for the next year, starting in January, so they can field rosters at the start of the actual league.
Yeah, so when you talk about implications for the future, I think MLG Vegas actually is incredibly compelling just because of what's at stake for most of the teams there in terms of staying together and what it means for their orgs moving on in the future in terms of who they're planning around and all the rest.
Okay, so one team that isn't going to be at Vegas and obviously hasn't been in action recently in offline competition just because how it's shaped out is Misfits. And this was the team where obviously they had the big result at Overwatch Open, but now they've made this roster move. They've brought in an old Quake player. They brought in Cooler. What did you think of this move? Because obviously this is like a blockbuster move.
This move is probably making Misfits weaker, at least in the short term. That's what it seemed like just watching them in the EU Alienware Monthly Melee, where Crew is one of the best Zarya's in the game. They were flexing Zebosai the Zarya instead. They weren't getting the same results, and it just Misfits did not feel well. I mean, they made the change very spur of the moment. Apparently, it came down to personality conflicts between Zebosai and Crew, or something along those lines. But long and short of it, Crew is out, Cooler is in. And they do this right before DreamHack. It's very confusing that they'd make this sort of change right before, where the team environment must have been very tense between the two to get to that point, to make that big of a change so soon before a major event.
What do you think, Monty?
I haven't actually seen the new Misfits yet, so I don't know if I have an opinion as it stands right now. I'm gonna be looking forward to seeing how they do at some more of these offline events coming up, and DreamHack is going to be happening in 2 days, so that's where we're actually going to start to see how they're going to do against teams that have been performing well, like NIP.
Like, what pisses me off about the move is, like, not anything to do with the implications of who they picked up and who they kicked. What pisses me off is I had to hear all those people for months now saying, maybe Misfits is actually the best team in the world. And then it's like, oh, you will never see them play another LAN. That's like fucking boo, boo. You all blow. Get out my face. Like, you have to prove it more than once. You can't just win in narrow fashion and then be like, oh, was the best in the world. Why are you changing your players then? Never mind that. Still the best. Wicked, yeah. Even you didn't think you were the best players in the world.
Well, the other thing, too, it's just sort of another example of Overwatch where you do have this team volatility right now, where even if a team, like, you have no bigger in-person event that you can win than the Overwatch Open at the E-League Studios. It literally the biggest thing you can win, and then before the next big event, there's already big roster changes. It's like, really?
Is this the thing you took, ZP, from some other game, this in-person like terminology you keep using? Like, is there a reason why you don't just say offline or LAN? Like, it sounds like you're working some angle on that fucking...
There's absolutely a reason.
Okay, come on, hit me with it. Hit me with it.
I'm just getting with the new terminology.
Okay. I've never heard this terminology, mate. It sounds like you're doing that fucking Kermit meme, like, in-person, ZP. Do it anyway. Say the new terminology. Brilliant. All right. What are you doing?
Monty knows why.
Is this some Blizzard thing where they have, like...
No.
What we would like is these terms to be used in the community.
No, I have not heard that.
Well, okay, keep it up. We're getting a handle on it so far. So, okay, yeah, these big in-person tournaments, like the volatility, where were you going with that?
Sorry, ask again.
Where were you going with that line of reasoning?
Oh, I was just going to say, like, just for Misfits, you have this entire situation where they win one of the biggest events, and then suddenly they've changed the roster before the next event. And it leaves question marks as to, wait, why? There's just this track record in Overwatch where even when a team is having really good success, they still change up rosters regardless. And just sort of goes to team volatility, where if your teams that are winning and have had a recent track record of great success are still changing up their rosters seemingly randomly at points, what hope do you have for the teams that are actually facing real turmoil that are losing and have a lot more stress placed upon them?
Well, we have longer-term contracts and real coaches and people to settle player conflicts and be the lightning rod in the team, so that the players don't all get mad at each other. They get mad at the coach instead, or the coach is the one dealing out the justice, right? You just have to hope that the infrastructure, because obviously these players can't be trusted not to tear themselves apart in, rather childish fashion.
So, okay, the problem with the Misfits move, I mean, and the Fnatic move to some degree, is it puts DreamHack Winter kind of in disarray in terms of any narratives leading into the event, because again, it would have been the next time to see Misfits and see would they live up to it. If Fnatic was there, people would have had them as a favorite. When we see now, I mean, who are the favorite for DreamHack Winter at the moment, ZP? Who's your money on?
NIP, and it's just the NIP with strong like exclamation point behind it, where NIP, you take a look at recent results, I mean, online or not, they've been looking very good. Misfits now has gigantic question marks over them with their roster change. Fnatic, who really knows where they stand after the IDDQD move, Fnatic has been off the radar as well. No one's really seen too much of them. They've presumably been scrimming, but they've been off. And then same goes for Complexity, who's also there, where Complexity, as we haven't seen anything from them in a while. So NIP has been the team that's been playing in everything, has been looking really strong, has been leveling up over the course of the last few months. I feel like all evidence points to NIP. Not saying that it's impossible for Fnatic or Complexity to come out there and surprise us, but there's not a lot of data. In Fnatic's case, they just had a pretty severe roster change, so it doesn't look great for them going into it.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the big problem, is you can't really know what the new rosters are going to play like, you know? I mean, obviously they could be fantastic, but it's hard to speculate in that sense. What are your thoughts on DreamHack Winter, Monte?
I haven't seen all of these teams competing recently because, again, I tend to put a lot of weight on the LAN events and I care a lot less about online. But from what I've seen, it does seem like NIP is a big favorite, considering they have had the roster stability and they have been stomping. And like we said earlier, they are probably a major beneficiary of this new patch. Like that, this should be a patch for NIP, and they were already strong beforehand. So seems natural that they would be able to, summon some more power at this event and actually take a pretty easy win. It does depend. Do you know, ZP, do you know any teams that are actually doing BYOC, pro teams that will be coming?
I don't know the full list. This is actually something I'm trying to do research on. I know Mouse Sports is coming in there. I heard that from Burix, and I think there's a handful of others. I don't know if there's any extremely strong teams that are going. There's definitely teams that are in and around the scene. I don't know the confirmed BYOC teams. There's just no resource that I can see to get aside from talking to players and going, hey, I'm going to the BYOC part of it.
Do you think that the Ana nerfs were necessary? I mean, people had essentially, they were claimed that it just like destroyed all the other comps. So what was your position on that and where it shook out now?
I think the Ana nerfs are good. I mean, more so than anything else, the speed boost on Nano Boost getting removed actually makes it so you have to worry about your positioning a little bit more going into it. It probably biases the ult a little bit more towards heroes that already have mobility and don't have to care. But it means that you're not going to have a Reaper just getting free positioning where, oh, you don't even have an ultimate up and you're nowhere near. We're going to throw the ultimate on you anyways because you're so fast that it doesn't actually matter where you're at. I mean, in general, Ana was getting played in everything before the nerfs. She's getting played in a whole lot after the nerfs. So to me, it feels like if she's still getting played a ton after the nerfs, it doesn't seem like the nerfs were unwarranted just on that level alone. But in general, the speed boost seemed a little bit ridiculous.
I like the nerfs. I think they're fine. But like you're saying, it now biases, as we discussed earlier, towards Soldier or D.Va or Winston or any hero with a large amount, Genji, with a large amount of built-in mobility. I actually would have preferred if they kept the speed boost and they removed the 50% damage reduction so that there was a way to quickly burst down a target that was being targeted, but you could still reasonably ult a Reaper or reasonably ult a Reinhardt. Now, you can, on fringe cases, still ult those heroes if they're in the right position. But my problem was that you didn't have, like, the only way was, like, chain CC to shut down the Nano Boost target, whereas I think that you should be able to shut down the Nano Boost target if you could just deal a lot of damage. But, dealing 500 damage to a Reaper with a Zarya shield on top of him is super hard to do. So,
well, don't forget, too, it's giving you extra damage reduction, and it's not like you still can't get healed during it, so you might be trying to do 500 damage to that Reaper, but guess what? The Ana's heals are effectively double the power based on the damage you're doing, so it's just a complete... Trying to kill someone with an Ana is just terrible.
I think that's the change I personally would have made, because I think it does make it more diverse in terms of the number of targets that you can have, and it still rewards the positioning while not like shutting out a lot of heroes that were using it previously. Maybe you slightly nerf the speed boost at the same time that you remove the damage reduction, but that would have been my preferred change. But this change is fine too. I don't think it's bad.
Yeah, I think either one probably would have worked.
So as we alluded to before, there will be the MGA tournament, which is going to take place in London, and this is the tournament where we'll get to see some Koreans play against some Western teams they haven't faced yet, because Kongdu Panthera will be going, NIP is there, Fnatic's there, Rise Nation. So we haven't seen Fnatic and NIP against the Koreans, and this is not in theory the best Korean team. How do you think that Panthera will actually match up against these teams, Monty? What do you think?
Again, I haven't really seen much of Rise Nation. They've been sort of coming out of nowhere recently, and Fnatic post roster change. I will just speak to Kongdu Panthera in isolation, that they are immensely skilled individually, and I think that they struggled in terms of their team play and overextensions by like players like Butcher and Evermore early on in the season. But I think their last win was really convincing over Runaway. And from what I understand of talking to people who scrim against them, everybody who scrims against them thinks they're very good, like really good. And they were able to beat their sister team in a best of 3. And as I said earlier, and the qualifiers for this, sometimes that can be fluky with sister teams. Like sometimes you just know too much about the other one because you're practicing with each other all the time. And there can be matchups that one team, despite being the worst team, has consistently won. At least that's been my experience in League of Legends sometimes. But that said, like, I think Waka Waka this is a great meta for him in particular, huge hero pool on this guy, and I think they're going to be a challenge at this event for other teams to take down.
I think it's going to be interesting to see just how they match up against the different Western teams, particularly because it feels like it's a little bit, if I had to look at the 4 teams that are involved, it's Rise, NIP, Kongdu, and Fnatic. I actually feel like Fnatic is the one under the most pressure here, where there is a lot of expectations beyond the team. Rise Nation, they're new, right? So if Rise Nation gets bopped by everyone, ends up in 4th, that's okay. But if Rise has really good showing, and they either get above NIP or particularly get above Fnatic, where going into it, you'd think they're going to be a little bit weaker than NIP from what we've seen, it could be the worst possible outcome there for Fnatic, where they end up 4th in a case where they probably, it could be a very bad look because there's only 4 teams. In terms of how they match up, kind of feel like Kongdu would be able to at least beat Rise Nation. How they match up against New Fnatic, we'll have to see. It's going to depend on how we see from Fnatic and DreamHack. And same goes for NIP. I don't know. It's just, there's a lot that can change between now and then. A few weeks is actually an enormous amount of time, especially as the meta is developing.
Okay, so obviously people are wondering how Sombra is going to affect the competitive scene.
Yes.
And supposedly teams practice it, people are trying to experiment with it, but you haven't yet seen the scenario where it's just going to be thrown out there. What do you actually anticipate will be the use for this champion? Well, whatever you call it, your character.
I don't see it as useful in this particular meta. Maybe I'll be proved wrong. It's also she's not really like a true DPS hero either, because all of her abilities are utility and not damaging. So the only way I can see that you feasibly use her is in like a 3 DPS comp with 2 other DPS, and then being very smart about how you control high ground with her and how you position yourself for using your hacks and your ult. Because the ult is insanely powerful, but to get to that point is tricky, I think. I think that it's going to be a while before we see like the true Sombra experts showing up. And even then, I think ditching one of your tanks or one of your supports for Sombra right now is a pretty huge risk.
It is a huge risk. I would say if we do end up seeing her, though, it's probably going to be more on the defensive end. We saw Shadowburn pull it out for FaZe on the defense recently and all the rest. And I think the idea for on defense is actually reasonably sound in theory, where obviously offenses tend to be pretty telegraphed when they go in. And they go, okay, they have a billion ults. Now they're all going to come in and blow everything. They're on the way. Sombra with EMP, of course, can drop down and interrupt that entire chain of reaction, give the defense a much better chance of dealing with it. From defensive positioning, too, there's more areas for Sombra to drop down, get on a support character, and all the rest. It'll be interesting to see if it works out in that particular respect. There is one part of Sombra that actually kind of works against her when teams have been running her, which is, so in Teamfight Flow in Overwatch, you have the situation where both teams run at each other, and a team that's losing the fight blows a lot of ults, but then they still lose the fight. So now they're just double screwed because they've thrown resources into a losing fight. When you're running a Sombra, and your Sombra lets you win the fight, by her very nature of locking out abilities, she's going to stop the other team from using ultimates. So you effectively get your team wipe where you've blown 2-3 ultimates, including the EMP, But because your EMP initiation was so good, the other team got to save all their ultimates, and they're just going to come in and win the next team fight because your EMP stopped them from throwing resources into a losing fight. So there's sort of this pushback wave effect where even if you do really well with Sombra, you're still throwing away the next team fight, which is odd. But
it's all about the timing. Then you have to bait out those ults instead. It requires very good judgment from the Sombra player. I think she's a very high skill cap hero. Yes. I'm excited to see her. And I just think, in my experience in a lot of pro games, it takes a few weeks for the players to actually get used to her and comfortable on her, even if she is going to be incredibly powerful. Like Ana. Everybody was like, when Ana came out, Ana's shit. But Ana turned out to be super good, just very difficult to play properly.
Ana did get a lot of buffs though, following, because I think Blizzard wasn't happy with her win rate, and suddenly I think her clip, I think on PTR it was 6, then on live it was 8, and then finally it got buffed to 10. It got a 20% throughput increase in terms of attack speed, and then her sleep got changed where her sleep had like a minimum like duration for being slept.
And the bionic grenade, everything huge. I mean, yes.
Okay, so
but that said, I think she would have been powerful and used even on release if you just gave her a couple weeks.
True. I agree, especially with what people are doing later on with Beyblade and all the rest, where I think people still find ways of using that even with the Sombra that's a little bit less lacking in overall power.
So, okay, if you say like people it had a logical place perhaps on defense. I remember a while ago there was that big discussion thread that was like people saying that essentially they think the defensive heroes aren't actually that strong, like the meta of them. Like a lot of them are just ones where people just use heroes defensively. They're actually like like Road Dogg or something that obviously doesn't have to be a defensive champion. What do you think of this? Is there enough defense out there? Is it viable enough?
So in terms of heroes specific to defense, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think there's been a lot of metagame mechanics that have sort of made things difficult for heroes more so than they would. Like the classic case of that would be Junkrat, right? Where Junkrat, there's a point where he was played constantly on defense and then sort of fell off. And I mean, you still see him from time to time, but he got sort of hurt by two things. One is that in the previous patch, ult-wise, anytime you're a Junkrat spamming in, you would be doing AoE damage, but not necessarily killing people, which means the Ana heals people, gets out quicker, and then she now has the resources to smash your team. Yeah. So fueling support ults is a problem for some of the defense heroes, and I'll just keep using Junkrat as my test case here. But then also Zarya, where anything that relates to poke damage that holds people back, guess what? You're fueling Zarya, who is even more hyper-powerful last patch, where, Junkrat and the Zarya. Now the Zarya is 100% energy. And even heroes like Torbjorn and Symmetra fall in the same thing, where you have auto-attacking turrets that are doing damage without necessarily killing. You feed support ults, you feed Zarya, etc. Maybe they've been helped a little bit by this last patch, but it's really hard to tell.
Okay.
I think the key is that with Torbjorn, who we are seeing with a little bit increased frequency, right, is that it comes down to turret placements. You have to place your turrets in a way that people are only going to encounter them once they commit to the attack. If you're playing them on defense, that way they're not really fueling support ultimates because the turret's just there in the middle of a giant team fight that's happening. So you have to know where the placements are going to be, that you're not giving away like free poke damage that can just get healed up by the Ana. But yeah, I agree. And we have seen certain cases for Junkrat, like before the patch, TviQ liked to play Junkrat on like Anubis point A defense. There were situational use cases where it did make it very hard to attack properly if there was a Junkrat on a certain map on defense. But yeah,
also
there just needs to be less healing from Ana. I think the big problem with Ana for me is the healing per second or the healing per minute is too high right now. And that means that chip damage and poke damage means nothing.
Yeah, and that's been an issue for a long time too, where I mean, Ana I think is just sort of the ultimate example of it, but poke damage should never be, or maybe not never, but the prevailing thought in the game shouldn't be, I don't want to shoot this guy unless I get a kill because then I'm fueling the support that's going to heal up really quickly. Like, there should be a give and take there where even if you've damaged someone heavily and they do get support ult off of it, you're getting valuable time by pushing them back as opposed to, I'm not even getting any time because the support is healing up the hero instantly. There is one...
And you're actually just empowering their attack at that point because, you're just giving them a bunch of nano boost charge and then they can attack sooner when they're going to have an Ana that has a 30% like advantage basically on the ultimate, and they just have nano boost edge. I mean, the game should not work like that, right?
or it at least should be a case where, okay, we're getting poked down, we have to back off for 15 seconds. Up, we went in again. Up, we got poked down for 15 seconds, and then maybe you do get your support up quicker, but the defense is bought a minute, which is probably a much fairer trade at that point. And I will note one thing before we get too far moved. Not every defense hero's had problems. Mei certainly, she got buffed, got nerfed in this last patch, but Mei was a gigantic fixture of just delaying and just all sorts of absurdity in the last patch. So it's some defense heroes definitely did have a good time, but not most of them.
Okay, I wanted to get your take on something that we actually discussed briefly on the first episode, just because since you've been within Overwatch for a long time, and I wanted to see what your take on is it. So obviously one natural thing that people discussed when the competitive scene really started going was like hero limit, etc. But Monte brought up the concept of maybe at some point in the future there would essentially straight up be a draft, where the idea is you couldn't just have the same champion on, same hero on both teams, maybe you would draft and this would create a hierarchy of what would be picked and how you'd create the comp. What are your actual thoughts on this? Are you resistant to it?
So for these sorts of things, I try and keep an open mind. I will say historically, I've been pretty resistant to it, just on the idea that there's too many vital heroes in the game where you take them out, it starts feeling very broken in terms of what you want to play. And then you also get rid of the idea of specialist heroes and what the rest of people like Shelburne, they're really fun to watch. Although, as much as I say it breaks the game, I'm also open to what Monte has brought up in the same argument where he says, no, break the game. It's actually the best time. So I think Monte's arguments are compelling. It's hard to say for me. I can argue both sides. I see the wisdom in both sides. I would say in general, I still probably hold a little bit against the idea of a draft right now, just because, again, taking a look at it, I like the idea of having people that are super well-known in heroes. And also, I'm not entirely sure the game wouldn't just break, particularly when it comes to supports, where what do you do for pick ban on supports and all the rest? I don't know if the game holds up if suddenly a team can't play like 2 or 3 supports or whatever it might end up being. So, coming back from a little bit of Heroes of Storm back in the day, I know that drafts had a really big problem in that game with small hero pools, just because you could band out entire segments of the game for you actually can't, now you actually don't have a good healing supporter. Now you don't actually have a good initiator because the hero pool is so low. So from that perspective, I'm not a fan of a draft, although I do think there might be some potential there from Monte's arguments that could have been worth exploring, though I don't think
to be fair, I was not advocating.
No, he just brought it up as a possibility.
It was merely a thought experiment. I think actually I don't think we should have a draft, but I was just discussing it and what the implications would be on the game, not saying that I was an advocate, just to be clear.
Okay. That is a good distinction.
Because the thing is, I actually did think of one extra benefit that it would bring, which isn't tied naturally into the competitive side, which, if it ever was to exist, would clearly benefit Overwatch, which would be, it would mean you wouldn't have 2 of the same hero in the game, and you wouldn't have any issue differentiating which one was on which team and that sort of thing, which I guess is only a side benefit. It's not a primary reason to do it, obviously. But I mean, again, if you're trying to streamline some components of it to make it easier to watch, if you know there's only McCree on one team, there is no confusion when you hear that sound, right?
Well, to what you mentioned, that was not to derail too much, but that was a big reason why one hero limit was probably so incredibly important back in the day. Because I remember doing casts where you would have, 2 Tracer, 2 Winston, 2 Lucio, and it was confusing as the caster because a lot of times you just didn't know who was doing one unless you were specifically zoomed in on them, which of course makes it absolute chaos for the viewer and all the rest. So I think one hero limit at least was needed just for that particular clarity. But you're right, is that if you did have a hero draft where each team can only play one of each hero, then it's even more clear where, say you're watching a Shelburne game and somehow the other team lets him get Genji, which probably wouldn't happen in a draft situation, but say it did. You know, anytime a Genji's going crazy, that's Shadow Burn. You don't have to look at the kill feed. You don't have to wait for it to be announced. And
I think too, like, just in general, that goes back to the spectator problem, because right now one of the most confusing things as a spectator or a caster is that, so when you're in the game, a lot of times you know which is the McCree that is ulting, or the Zarya that's ulting, because it's either in English or in Russian, or they have different voice lines for whether it's on your team or the enemy team. But for now, what happens is that whomever's perspective that you are looking through, it'll have that voice line as if you are that player, which is just, I mean, it's terribly confusing. And that I don't know how to fix that problem, but that's a problem that needs to be fixed. Whether, actually, you know what? I do know how to fix this problem. You create unique voice lines for two different teams in a spectating environment. But that might also be difficult to understand for casual players who are just coming in, who understand that It's High Noon means something, right? And if It's High Noon is not the game anymore, from a spectator perspective, that's also it's a difficult problem to solve.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to bring up there, where if you're an Overwatch player where you play a lot of casual Overwatch, and say there's a time in the future where there's a heavy promotion game, you'd be like, come watch this Overwatch tournament. You're like, I love Farah. Justice reigns from above. And then Farah has a different sounding line for that. It's just like, wait, what? What is this Farah doing? I don't understand.
I take back my idea.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it's very complicated. But that's one of the many spectator issues that needs to be solved is that one.
Okay, so one thing we didn't really touch on is, since TaleSpin left Envious and is a big name, he must naturally find a new place to go. What do you think, if you take out the politics of where he would want to go, who would have him, what the impact of his departure in this manner would be? ZP, if you had to conceptually figure out a team that TaleSpin would fit in, who would you put him into?
Fnatic. Assuming that there's no bad blood from how the Envious situation went, and I mean, as far as I know, Matt and Taylor are still good buds. If Fnatic's new DPS player that they're trying out, I think it's Halfy Cool, is not doing the job, I feel like TaleSpin is a much more natural fit to go in there. Now, I don't know if the team chemistry is there, but obviously Fnatic's looking for a projectile DPS. Here's a projectile DPS that even has played with someone in the past. It makes way too much sense.
Yeah, I think that's the most obvious position for him to end up alongside Buds there. Having too many sort of hit scan players was Fnatic's original problem, and he serves the needs that they have for sure.
Okay. Is it actually known, is it even floated as to when OGM will do their next season once this one ends? Because obviously this one ends in early December. Is it known it'll be a few weeks break or anything, or a month's break, or what? Do you know what it'll be, Monty?
Yes, but I probably shouldn't say. There will be no more Apex in 2016. I will say that. Because the finals are on December 3rd. Yeah. And then after that, there will be a break for a little bit.
Okay.
Break your NDA.
Do you think there will ever be an Apex-type tournament in Asia where all the big Western teams will go?
Not just 4, you mean?
Send 6 or 8 or something.
That'd be sick. I mean, one of my favorite things about the Overwatch League, which has been, one of the announcements, is that most of the year is going to be a third-party circuit. So I certainly hope in the future, even after the Overwatch League starts, that we are going to see big Asian invitationals with a bunch of, Western teams and Korean teams and Taiwanese teams and Chinese teams. That'd be sick. I hope that happens.
Because ZP, I want to get your take on this as someone embedded in the scene. The big concern I have is, as a spectator, I want to see that. I want to see the best Koreans versus the 6. I wanted to see NIP there. I wanted to see Fnatic there. My big problem is, I think when I look at what happened in Apex and all those roster moves, I'm not going to be ridiculous and say I could have predicted that, but it makes sense to me as to why it would happen, because these were all teams who were just living at home. These all were teams who were just streamers, and then they played in tournaments as well. These weren't people who necessarily could handle living next to the other teammate for 3 weeks in a row, or whatever, and having to see that guy every day. So I actually feel like some of those teams...
Or the travel too, right? The insane burden of travel, moving from country to country, dealing with that stress also.
So my concern is, if there's enough money in other tournaments in the West, some of these teams will just be I'm not going for that reason. I don't want to go to Korea for that long. I want to pick my tournaments, and then if a tournament goes badly, I want to have 2 weeks off and not go to another one. What is your sense from how the Western players think of it?
I mean, it's hard to say. I do think Western players do want to chase the bigger events and all the rest. I also think there'd be a lot of pressure from their sponsors to actually go in and follow it through. Because here's the thing, is that if you have an org come out and say, we invited X team here and they declined, that's a pretty big PR hit, where it's we just want to go and do stuff in the West. There also is the matter of how many of these tournaments are actually going to conflict, where I think Blizzard probably doesn't want too many events to conflict. That much is obvious. So I don't know if you're going to have a case where you have really big tournaments going on in NA while there's a gigantic cup in Asia that's inviting Western teams. I mean, it could be, but as far as the third-party tournament circuit goes and all the rest, I think Blizzard probably wants things to be a little bit more organized than that. So I don't know if you're actually going to have the option for a team to, if you do have some like gigantic event, to necessarily dodge out, because there might not be an equivalent event up in their home turf. It's hard to say, though.
I mean, I certainly hope so, in my opinion, and I'd love to hear yours on this, Thorin. I think the CS:GO scene is like too crowded now. There's like too much shit going on, and I'd like to see more regulation from Blizzard during the off season, i.e., the majority of the year, in terms of who gets the rights to use Overwatch, because they have a chance to really kind of dole out to third-party tournaments. Not that Blizzard should be overwhelmingly controlling. Like, I certainly believe that there are a bunch of really quality organizers like Banana Culture in China, or OGN, or MLG, ESL, all these people who can run tournaments. I just would hope that there are not online cups. That's my number one goal, is that professional teams should not be playing in online leagues or online cups during the off season. We should only have LANs, and that Blizzard is sensitive to how they schedule it, so they don't schedule a bunch of, or allow events to schedule a bunch of shit on top of each other.
Okay, ZP.
They are.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
So, how do you feel about CS:GO right now? Are you happy with the way that CS:GO is rolling, like with all these online leagues and the competition between events? Would you like Valve to step in and be a little bit more of a judicious in the way that they dole out the rights to make these tournaments?
I'm not really sure, because the thing is, it's not the online leagues that are the big issue for me personally. Like, I just don't watch online leagues. It doesn't matter to me. It's more that there are a lot of LAN tournaments, and the big problem I've seen is that outside of the majors and E-League, in general, you get a lot of kind of like, I would call the events tier 2, but you get some tier 1 teams that go to them. And the problem is there's too many of them that are like the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 first place. And it's like people have sort of figured out, outside of huge events, like what you can get away with paying. And then you know that you won't get all the best teams. You'll get 2 or 3 really good teams, and then you'll get 3 or 4 other teams, and then you'll get a couple of teams that'll be like, hey, we should go, we have a chance at this one. Whereas I would rather, obviously, just there was like one tournament every 5 weeks, let's say, that had nearly every good team there. Now, it's true, for the storyline, it can help that all the teams aren't there. Like, if you really do just play every week, that can be a problem to some degree. But I don't think it's necessarily like a pure saturation issue. So my problem there is I don't really know how Valve themselves could actually like decide that, because I actually feel like the obvious way to solve it is what's happened with like E-League, for example. E-League existing, and then how the system of how you qualify for the majors itself initially limited how many LANs there could be. Because, for example, during E-League, if you're playing on that week, you can't go to a LAN. So, for example, Team Dignitas was not at IM Oakland. They were playing in a group the same week, even though Team Dignitas is one of the best in the world in CSGO. So in that sense, it already did start to bring back some of the saturation. But for me, the obvious way to do it is actually without like the big brother hand coming in and telling you not to do the tournament. It's to give people a reason not to go to all the other tournaments. And so the obvious reason to me is you make the bigger tournaments better. And the idea is then people eventually will learn naturally as they do. It makes no sense to go to 3 tournaments rather than go to 1 or 2 and definitely win them because you're in peak form,
But do you think that the way to perhaps eliminate some of these tier 2 tournament organizers is not just to have the big dogs like Turner come in, but to actually say, for Valve to say, okay, there is a minimum level of production, there's a minimum level of prize pool if you want to actually run, a LAN?
I mean, you could say that. The problem is, I actually don't know if there's that many organizations at the moment that separate themselves that clearly on those lines, Like, I don't know actually that, like, for example, ESL's a huge org. They don't necessarily have production that's like 2 times better than the tournament we're talking about, So I think it would be hard even to make that. So as a result, my fear there is it would just become industry politics, and someone would say, well, ESL is a bigger org, therefore you get the tournament, and this guy doesn't, who's the new dog, who maybe actually has the pieces to be as good. So, I mean, I actually agree that in Overwatch, I can already see the issue to some degree. Like, what's funny is this month is basically what I'm talking about in Overwatch right now, where you have like 2 or 3 LANs, and none of them are really killer until you get to Vegas. Like, the rest of them are just like, oh, there's this team, yeah, they're sort of good, and then the other team are like a question mark, and then there's a team that's not good, and like, you'd rather
Vegas is also not even that great because it's all NA, right? We don't have European teams, like, we don't have Asian teams, like. it's like 8 NA teams. So it's the best out of the LANs that are going to be happening besides Apex, closing, finishing up. But in terms of the like more weekend LANs, yeah, it is.
Okay, what do you think about that then? Like, what do you think about the fact that Vegas is sort of like, right, well, there's a lot of popular teams in the West, so let's make a Western tournament as opposed to like, 6 spots for the best Western team, and then like you bring in 2 Asian teams or something. What do you think about the...
I think it's all NA because, like, why didn't they invite Misfits or NIP or Rogue? Like, I don't get the NA focus. Do you know something about CP?
I don't know anything. This isn't something where I was told or anything about how things could be going, or this is no sort of inside information. But my gut feel to how that would be going is just the idea that it's MLG's first event in Overwatch. They probably wanted to keep things simple. Okay. Grab teams that are in NA, do an NA event, and then expand out from there, where you have to worry about things like, how to get players over internationally and all the rest. And they probably just wanted to keep it simple, would be my basic guess. And keeping an NA is probably a way of doing that.
Reasonable.
Okay, so ZP, you didn't get to say anything about this. Now, you have referenced already about 5 times online results. So ZP is heavily embedded in the world of online cups. Do you want there to be no online play for elite teams?
I guess it depends on what your definition of online play is. I think so. It's an interesting question. I think online play. Let me think of how to frame this. It depends on how frequent your in-person. It's great. Your LAN events are. How frequent those actually are. Because if you have them every month, then you probably don't need online cups for those teams. I still think online cups serve a big purpose for scouting out new talent, finding out who's out there, and certainly online cups have been instrumental in new teams like Kingdom, Immortals, and Rise coming up. It's been really good to watch. It's also been good to watch teams like C9 really hone themselves, where C9, of course, they haven't been in on all these other events. They've rebuilt their roster, and now they've been grinding out the best thing they can do short of being in person, which is tournament environments online. And they've been getting really good results off it. So I guess roundabout way to answer stuff here, it depends on the frequency of your big LAN events that are going on. So if your LAN events are frequent, I don't think you need online cups that cater to the top teams. Right. And the online cups can then be your farm system, your minor leagues. If the LAN events aren't as frequent, I think having, say, a big online monthly cup for online is not bad. I think the problem that you get into is I don't think you have a situation where you have big LANs every month to even like bi-monthly and then trying to like force online cups targeted towards the top end at the same time. I think that'd be a little
sure, but I mean, I assume the premise Monty's creating is that when the Overwatch League comes, that's already that part of the year carved out, and then you've got whatever your 6-7 months left. That is the open circuit, and now if people are going to compete, they are going to kind of be on that. It's there's not much real estate to carve up there if it's only 6 or 7 months or something.
Well, right. Well, the 6-7 months is a thing. Well, hopefully that's just a case where you have your cases where, maybe ESL has a cup 1 month and then E-League has a cup a next month for in-person stuff. And then your top teams are all in there, all at a LAN environment. And all.
Or some of the teams are heading over for a season of Apex in the off season.
Exactly.
Right? Like maybe 4 Western teams after the season is over go to Korea and stay there for 2 months doing Apex. I mean, I'm really excited because for me, this is the best system in esports in theory, right? It obviously the devil's in the details depending on how it plays out, but I love the fact that like for Overwatch we're going to have a super hype regular season that is going to be brief along the lines of a standard sports season, and then the rest of the year we get tons of international competition and the teams can choose whether to take breaks, to take vacations, or go to this event or go to that event. And I don't know, it seems pretty cool to me. So it's my world, though, like I said, and like you inferred, Thorin, was that there are going to be plenty of opportunities for organizers to have these big offline events because they're going to have 7 months of the year to do so, and the demand will be high for organizers like DreamHack or like ESL or like MLG or like OGN or like Banana Culture to fill up the rest of the schedule on their own.
Like, do you have something to say for ZP?
Oh, no. I was just going to pile on and say, like, if you have those events piling in, then you shouldn't need online cups really for the top teams.
Yeah, okay. So while you were saying that, I was just thinking about the CSGO example. Here's the way I would simplify it for the CSGO example, is that it shouldn't need to be Valve already who stops the oversaturation. Like the biggest problem I think in esports, Monty, and this goes beyond just CSGO, but it's an obvious one because I've seen the same complaint in Dota 2, which is an open circuit game where people said that there was oversaturation and player burnout, is that in an ideal world, teams themselves wouldn't want to send their players to so many events. They would understand this takes away their chance to win the big event, or, you know, they're overworked and they're not having time to practice. But teams themselves, at the moment, unfortunately, in a lot of these esports games, just look at what is stable exposure, which is if I at least send you to the event, I get some exposure. If I have you in every league, you know, you're going to qualify for more offline events. So they essentially try to put their players into everything. And the biggest problem I have is, level one that you could solve the problem is teams themselves are just a bit more intelligent about it. And they're like, right, we're going to pick out these events and we're not going to do this event and then we're going to do these ones and let's all schedule it out. So they're not doing that. And then even worse, the players can't leverage them because my experience of players are the sort of people who are like, they never think beyond today. So when they come to sign their contract, a star player could be like, I'd like us to have more say in which events we can veto. Instead, I imagine their scenarios is more like, how about I just pay you $1,000 more? Yes, sir, whatever you say. So in this scenario, everyone's failing on every level to avoid the oversaturation problem. And that's the primary issue I see, because obviously it doesn't make, like, for example, look at what we've got right now. So this new Fnatic team, I think they're out of their fucking minds playing DreamHack Winter, the MGA, and then Vegas, like all in a row. Like 3 events in a row. And these aren't even like, you know, the biggest events of the year or anything. Like that's a prime recipe to have like a blow up, someone leave the team, you know, you do badly in one, you don't have time to prepare properly for the next one, people going with a bad attitude. I mean, sure, it could all go great and then they could have fully battle tested their roster. That's the best world scenario. But there's a lot of ways that could blow up, you know, where maybe you should have picked one of those events to say no to, you know.
To say no to. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that if I'm them, you know, part of their team is European, right? And maybe you go to DreamHack and then you go to MGA because they're in the same sort of part of the world. You go from Sweden, then you go to London and whatever. But then flying to Vegas after that, I mean, that's rough. Well, that's real rough.
Just to travel alone, I mean, there's not that much time between the MGA event in Vegas, and you're going to have people, presumably they're going to finish up at MGA and then immediately fly over to Vegas to boot camp.
Yeah.
And then they're going to have to get over the jet lag, and they're definitely physically not going to be in peak position there. And again, we were just talking about sort of what's at stake at MLG Vegas. Sure, maybe if Fnatic is able to win, say, DreamHack, or do well at DreamHack, do well at MGA, maybe it's not the end of the world if they get, you know, just a bad result in Vegas, because then you can point to burnout going forward. But if they have bad results in the first 2, and then the Vegas is sort of the coup de grace, then that Fnatic team could be completely busted by the time it's all said and done.
Yep. And then also the other thing is, like, first of all, burnout is a real thing. Like, I've seen that happen to a lot of teams. But then even worse, one complaint that is fairly common, which I do agree with in CSGO, for example, where sometimes you do have the 2 events in 3 weeks or something, is that you didn't have any time to go home and then fix things between the last event. So you're kind of just going on a lot of what you had at the last event. And the teams that now play at the second event and weren't at the first event have been watching you and they have been preparing, and you feel like, even though to the outside it's like, well, here are just 2 teams playing. It's like, well, one has kind of a big advantage over the other one, you know.
Yeah, the game planning is actually completely a thing there, where particularly in Overwatch 2, where there's a lot to be said for looking over your VODs, looking over your scrims, figuring out what other teams are doing, all the rest, where if you look at a team, and teams don't even exploit this to the degree that they should here yet, but you can definitely look at a team, see how they engage, see what to expect going forward. And yeah, I mean, if you know you're going against Fnatic in Vegas and you're not at DreamHack or MGA, guess what? You're going to have tons of footage on Fnatic from those 2 events. And as you mentioned, they don't exactly have time to change things up. So yeah, I mean,
well, especially in a world where coaches don't exist to actually, or analysts to digest that information and feed it to the players, while the players are playing. They all have to do it themselves right now. There's not enough time for these guys.
I've got this is going to be one of my classic digressions, which is going to sound like I'm making a point, but it's not really going to be a point, but it's going to be entertaining in doing so. So I actually heard a really baller anecdote.
I've never actually heard you preface it.
I don't normally do that. I just go into it without any of the disclaimer. So I heard this baller anecdote, right, from Kobe Bryant, because now he's retired and he's in the business world, right? He's never going to be involved in basketball in theory again, right? So someone was asking him about some of the unique things that his teams used to try and do in terms of psychological warfare in the game. And so one of the things he said was that certain games, if they knew there was some tension in the other team, so for example, let's say there's 2 star players in the opposing team and one of them has a max contract. He's the franchise player, he's going for, and the other one hasn't got the max contract yet. He probably wants it at the end of the season and he's probably should get it, but it's still, it's in that scenario where he should really be on like what you call a contract year in basketball, which is where you try to play your best in that year to max your value out, so you get the big contract, you get the good deal. He said what they would literally sometimes do in regular season games is they would be like, right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to double team the guy who hasn't got the max contract and make sure he never gets the ball and just fuck with him constantly. And then the guy who has the max contract, we're just going to leave him, one-on-one coverage. He can have shots all day long. And then what you'd do is he'd just go over to the other guy. Like the other guy would be complaining anyway, but the idea is you could also just go over and go, man, they don't ever pass you the ball, do they? It's fucked up, isn't it? Like, man, you're one of the best players on this team, like you could use mad psychological warfare. So in that scenario, when I look at all these NA teams, Monty, obviously this wouldn't happen. This would only work in the anime version of teams that work in my brain. But if I knew all the shit that goes down in these Western teams and the egos of like NRG and Envious, I'd just be doing shit like that. Like I'd be playing my whole strategy around like fucking with the one guy. Like for example, in this scenario, I'd make it so that like I was making Tailspin's life hell in Envious, and then Taimu's just going off all game, and then I'd be saying to Tailspin in private, like, I've always thought you were one of the most dedicated players in the team. Like that other guy, he just doesn't seem to be putting in the effort though, does he? It's like he's not really sort of playing for himself. He's playing for himself and not the team. Like, listen, I hope it works out for you because I think you're all a wicked team, So, like, that's what I would do in the early days, Monty, where the coaching hasn't come in yet and there is no one to solve. I'd actually be essentially going full. Like my approach is the little finger approach, is just to cause like espionage, sabotage. Yeah, that's my approach.
So Thorin gets picked up by Envy or some other top-tier org as a psychology reason. Now we'll know why. Yeah. We'll know what is
just going for mental warfare. I don't know anything about the game. I won't even attempt to tell people how to play the game. It will just, essentially, I will be like a tilt specialist. Instead of trying to un-tilt my players, I'll tilt the others.
Maybe that was Envy's specialty the other day. They see the coming out. Because honestly, we didn't talk about this, but one of the reasons why Envy upset Rogue is they shut down TviQ. How'd they do that? They take the most broken hero right now, D.Va, and they shove D.Va in TviQ's face like 24/7. I mean, Mickey spent most of that series just standing in front of TviQ with his right click held down. Yeah. It was hilarious. But like, if you want to tilt a team like Envy or like Rogue rather, you take one of their best players, use the stupidly powerful hero that exists right now that can completely just sit on somebody's face the entire game and make sure they don't do anything. And a great strategy, right? And plus, it's a substitute player. Like, think about how tilted TviQ must be as one of the best players in the world. He's like, fuck this stupid hero that is totally broken right now. Oh, they're going to take a Thai player, a random substitute, and he's going to shut me down. Like, that's like legendary tilt right
particularly
there.
Too, where TviQ going in and to be feeling really good about this patch because Soldier was one of his bread and butter heroes. It's like there's so many great holds that he's had with Soldier back in the day. Think back to just, for me, I think back to TviQ on maps like Watchpoint Gibraltar. He just sets up camp on top of the hangar and guns people down all day. But no, he didn't get to have a glory. He had a D.Va in his face going, nerf this, like the entire time. Then getting blown up by his ultimate at the end too, just to twist the dagger just a little bit more.
It's a random sub too. Like that's what tilts you. You're like, I'm one of the best players in the world, and this substitute, this hero is so broken that this substitute player is able just to completely wreck me over and over and over again. Like there must have been some tilt involved there for sure.
And let's not forget too, Mickey is a very happy-go-lucky guy. Like he gets excited over everything. We remember listening to Thailand during opening week and just them losing their shit even when they were losing. They were still like super happy. So he probably looks over there and sees Mickey just like having the time of his life, screaming at the top of his lungs as the D.Va is in his face. He's just like, oh god, just screw this. This is terrible.
It's because the secret to this sort of
it was all the long range plan for Envy to get TviQ back. They know if they tilt him and cause Rogue the internal strife, that they can pick him back up to replace Tailspin, right? Calculated.
Because the whole point is actually what this whole anecdote came from was someone had asked him something like, obviously, since he was a very competitive player, like, how did you used to try and destroy your opponents? And one thing he said was, actually, I learned not only did you have to have empathy for your teammates, you have to have empathy for the opponent, because then you realize how you could truly destroy him. And that's like how fucked up his brain is, by the way, that like even his version of empathy is like, now I understand, how I could really hurt this individual. Like, you're fucked up,
This
mate.
can be used as a weapon.
So I'm thinking along similar lines.
There actually is a word for that, Thorin. Yeah. Do you know what that word is?
No.
Sociopathy.
Okay. No, but here's the thing. This is exactly the approach I always used to take, because I actually used to have a couple of friends who were notable pro gamers, and I always used to tell them, you're going about it all the wrong way. If you really hate that guy, don't tell him he's shit, which he knows he's not, Like, he has a wall built up for that. What you do is, if you really hate this guy, when you beat him, you go up to him and you shake his hand, and as you're shaking his hand, you just go, listen, you played amazing in that game. You did everything you could do. Like, there's nothing else you could do in that game. That's how you fuck with that guy's mind, because then it's his own inner demons that destroy him, That's how you tilt him. And you can also never be called out on that, because it seems like you're a really nice guy, So.
Yeah, all optics are like, he's just being a good sport. And
exactly,
it's like, it's why, like, competitive players, there's always, like, this divide over GG where some people get real annoyed at getting GG'd at. But also there's points where people, like, twist the knife purposely, where you get people that are normally never manner, but then they win a game and they come out immediately at the capital GG. That might as well be a capital, like, FU from some competitive players. So,
yeah, that's good.
You get that element as well.
I mean, unfortunately, I do have to say, if you live in a world where you can't handle people typing GG on a screen, yeah, I'm not sure you cut out for like this competitive discipline thing. Like maybe there should be some other game you could play. Mario Party, they might make a competitive mode of that or something. It's too much.
I just get so hard in Mario Party.
Exactly. So
bad memories.
Right, this is pretty much the end of the show. So ZP, do you have any final words for the audience who have seen you here?
Final words for the audience. Well, I mean, first off, great to be on the show. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I know you have a large base store and all the rest, but it's really good to see you coming into Overwatch, adding your insight to everything. It's been great. Hopefully, time on the show has been entertaining. Good to talk again with Monte after talking Overwatch World Cup stuff. And I mean, it's bright times for Overwatch ahead. I know this is sort of the beginnings of everything, and we went over a whole lot of topics, but this is the formative stages. We'll look back and go, yeah, these were our concerns back in late 2016. Wow, look at where everything went, 2 years from there. So it's an exciting time to be in.
Okay, no intros and outro.